The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of the Geek Skeezers and Googleization Show, where we're talking about living and working in a world where the wired, tired, and technology converge. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, and I'm here with my co-host, Keith Compagna, and our sponsors today are JobVite and Success Performance Solutions. We've got another great guest today, Rob Kelly. He's the co-founder of Ongig. It's a job description software company. So, Keith, I mean, we talked with Karen Young just a few weeks ago about job descriptions. That's from an HR perspective. Now we've got it from a marketing perspective. So this should be a ton of fun. Ongig's got a lot of great information out there. I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm really excited to talk with Rob. But let's put this in perspective. Last week we talked about, I think for the last 2 weeks, I talked about how Amazon updates its software every 11.6 seconds, which really kind of blows away this. But in prepping for the show, in fact, there's a TED Talk. I didn't even put it up yet. I discovered this last night. It was one of the highlights that came through yesterday. And they talked about, got it up here, make jobs less painful. It's only like 7 minutes. I'm going to post it up on LinkedIn. But within there was a stat, and maybe Rob can fill in the other blank here. There was a stat that the resume is over 500 years old. And Leonardo da Vinci, who died, by the way, in 1519, was the first person that actually reportedly had a resume.
No doubt.
Sort of about bio. And, here we are, 500 years, 5 centuries later, still talking about using a resume to apply for a job. So I had this idea, I wonder how old job descriptions, when was the first job description put in place? And my expectation was I'd be able to do a search, and there had to be some infogram. There had to be somebody talking about it. The closest I found was a reference in a book in 1947. It was a nursing journal. And they said the first job description that was written was during World War I. Don't have any history, tried to track that down. So when you think about it, the resume, how do you get a job? You put together a resume. It's 500 years old. The job description's 100 years old, and companies are still using it roughly the same way to get a job.
Right.
And so, then we look at we look at a company like Ongig, who's sort of turning the job description upside down, and we've been talking it for months. It's like you just, you got to market. I mean, recruitment's marketing.
Sure, absolutely.
Recruitment's absolutely marketing. So this should be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
But before we get there, we usually do a little catch up.
Sure.
You've been busy.
Yeah.
I think last week you were in another city.
I was at HR Transform in Vegas during the show, and I tell you what, it's so wild it's almost like the hope has been restored. For me, we get so tied up. Enrique Rubio, I ran into him. Great panelist discussion in his sessions. But we talked when he was on the show. We talked about how HR is really, their biggest challenge is going to be getting out of their own way. Well, at HR Transform, they were talking about what to do next, and it really demonstrated to me that the path has already started to be worn down. And there is a direction that companies can go regardless of their size and regardless of their industries. And it has everything to do with change, right? It has to do with the way work is being defined. We talk about, I had no idea that the job description started in the nursing industry, maybe, World War I.
Well, I don't think it started in nursing. I think that was just a quote. Right. He was talking about, in 1947, he was talking about how the job description needed to be reformed.
Yeah, but doesn't work need to be reformed, right? That's what we're talking about here,
absolutely.
Right? This idea of work in and of itself needs to be is evolving. So doesn't it make sense to be able to market that? in a different way.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And so, as we're talking about, let me see. I was making a couple notes here. Got things like all over the place here.
Like 5,000
one of those crazy mornings.
My eyes are bleeding looking at your computer screen.
So in this TED Talk, it starts out. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes actually. It's not a traditional TED Talk. They talk about applying for a job is one of the worst digital experiences of our time.
Amen.
Applying for a job in person really isn't much better. Hiring, as we know it, is broken on many fronts. It's just a terrible experience. 75% of people who applied for a job last year, we've talked about this a million times, this is all over my presentation. 75% of people who applied for a job never heard back from their employer, and 46% of employees who either get fired or quit within the first year of starting their role. Now, this isn't all just because of a job description, but the job description is just one symptom because, and then the other powerful thing, and you've heard me say this, and I know you're on board with it. If we only look at what people have done in the past, we're not going to be able to hire people for jobs that need to get done in the future because some of those jobs just didn't exist. And the stat that I suggest everybody take heed to is that 2/3 of all jobs will be 1/3 automated within the next few years, which means it doesn't mean you get to go home at 27 hours after you put 27 hours in. It just means that you're going to have different skills, better skills, be more productive during that period of time.
And the organization that recognizes that by training those employees that they have today to develop those skills will not only hold on to those employees, but will be able to grab other employees from other companies because word of mouth is really what matters anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to see how, and I think Rob's going to be able to talk about this a bunch. I'm pumped he's on the show. But, a lot of the feedback from HR Transform was debating where that employee experience really begins. And if you're going to bring somebody in on the candidate side, isn't that really where it starts, the relationship?
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that it's just been this crazy week of different things that have popped up. But just the other day, there was I can't even remember if it was an article or a video or something. And they said, we talk about the candidate experience. Mm-hmm. They say it's the candidate's experience.
Yeah,
apostrophe S. And they said it's the apostrophe S, the candidate's experience, is deliberate, and it's because candidate experience just sounds like a corporate strategy. Mm-hmm. Candidate's experience means standing in the shoes of the candidate, empathy, and an individual candidate. Not that one candidate looks like the other candidate. It needs to be personalized, which completely takes this to another level. Yep. So that's probably a good segue. By the way, just a reminder to anybody that's listening today live, you can call us at 561-623-9429, 561-623-9429, with any questions, comments, other topics you got in your mind. If you got a question for Keith, myself, or Rob. So let's.
Who's this Rob guy? Who's this Rob Kelly guy?
So Rob Kelly, we actually, this is the first time we've actually had a conversation. He and I have been going back and forth for a week or so on LinkedIn. He is a 4-time CEO.
That means he's crazy.
The author, proud father of a preemie toddler, Maverick.
Nice.
So we'll talk a little bit about that. He's currently the CEO of Ongig. It's a software company specializing in transforming the job description. Couple other things. Rob was previously head of a of a company in dating advice.
Nice.
So that certainly fits into recruitment and job matching. Healthcare and life music. I will post his resume up online later.
Yeah.
But he's an author of a book, An Enlightened Entrepreneur, 57 meditations on kicking ass in business and life. Does a lot of writing, got a bunch of degrees, more than I even do. I guess the most important thing is, got to find out, he was entered into the Guinness World Book of Records just by showing up, which was my experience just a couple weeks ago too. So we'll have to see. Maybe he was in the room, nice. Or maybe he was on the field with me. So hey, Rob, you there?
I'm here.
Welcome.
Okay. So, I mean, the most important question is how did you get in the World Book of Records?
First, Ira and Keith, so good to meet you. You've done an awesome job. I've been listening to some of your episodes. And before we dive into that, I just got to ask, how did you two meet? How did this magic happen?
I was on stage and Keith became my groupie.
No. I was on stage too, by the way. We met at a Disrupt HR event where Ira was discussing his newly released Recruiting in the Age of Googleization. And I was starting my personal brand, presenting a notion called work-life integration and calling BS on the failed HR policy of work-life balance. And then within a couple of weeks, we had caught up with each other. And by that time, I had moved over into JobVite, selling software in the recruiting industry. And from there, Ira and I really aligned. And then he started doing local workshops, and I promote his workshops to companies that I'm looking to work for because it's full of value, and it certainly speaks to the primary challenges. And I became the groupie. I know his content, and then here we are.
Yeah. So yeah, we live we live at the opposite ends of the Lehigh Valley, but we're close.
Fantastic. Well, you're doing a magical job here, and I appreciate you sharing it with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's talk a little bit. You heard me talking about the job descriptions. By the way, do you know the history of a job description?
It's so funny that you bring that up, Ira. Done a lot of research on this, and you're right. It was actually, it's hard to find the true origin. I can tell you that, and if you Google sort of Ongig job descriptions or just job descriptions plural, you'll find this. We actually write up a little history of at least what we found, and we're not claiming it's perfect. But really what we found was, in the 1400s when Gutenberg did the printing press, that started to change things. A couple hundred years later, the first newspapers started to come out and started to put what they would call classified ads, and classified meant things were classified into groups, like ads for housing and ads for jobs. And so, it's at least a few hundred years old, the first job description, and some feel older than that, as you were pointing out earlier.
Yeah, excellent. So I mean, obviously, you've been from dating, service, healthcare, music. You're a writer. You've written the book, entrepreneurship. How did you get into job description software? I mean, I'm sure you were a little kid and say, this is what I want to be when I grew up.
It's funny. I know no one says that, right? No one says they want to be in HR either, or in sales or in marketing. I've got a 3-year-old son, and trust me, all he's talking about these days is being a firefighter or being a drone flyer. He's fascinated with drones, flying them around.
Yeah, it's amazing how that firefighter thing just sticks. I mean,
save the day.
That seems to go across the decades, across generations of that's what you want to be when you grow up.
It's true. And notice that we got to gender neutralize it. It's not fireman anymore. It's firefighter, right?
Firefighter. Yeah. That's right.
Salesperson.
Well, we're definitely going to talk about gender bias.
Good.
I love what you're doing with that. So
good. I can't wait. The reason that this happened, a couple kind of key moments in my life. Back in the early 90s, I met Craig Newmark of Craigslist, and I saw how important job postings were on Craigslist, like up front, like sitting there with him in his office in San Francisco, early days of the internet. And I was fascinated that was driving it. He had no idea that would generate 90% of his revenue, and the guy's gone on to give away a bunch of money and build a really cool thing. That got me thinking. I kind of deposited that away, and I just sort of was keeping track of it. And then you mentioned the dating advice world. I worked for Double Your Dating and Hot Topic Media, and we basically mostly help single men, later some women, get more confident and more successful at dating. During that time, in around 2008 or so, I got to meet a guy named Brad Smart of Top Grading fame. He wrote the book Top Grading. This guy's a hiring nerd, and that's the greatest compliment I pay. I hope someone calls me a hiring HR nerd. He just knows his stuff. And he started to go through about the cost of a mishire and the data he had from working with General Electric. And he mentioned to me when he started to say, you hire a poor salesperson, and Keith, you could appreciate this, right? that a poor salesperson could cost you, 10, 15, 20 times that person's annual salary.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scratching my head saying, how does that work? Okay, you hire someone for, at the time, I was thinking, all right, $50K or something. How could that be, a $500,000, $1 million mistake? And he just said, well, they stay on for years. They infect other, A players at the job, these poor hires. And basically, when you total it up, GE and others were telling him it could cost up to, 6 figures, 7 figures for some jobs.
Sure.
So I inverted that. And I said, well, what if you had a good hire? What if you had an awesome hire? How much is it worth if we could hire Ira or Keith, right? Keith to sell for us. Well, when I inverted that, I did some research on this. The very best one hire of your next 100 hires, if you're leading talent or recruiting or HR, can be worth $30 million per year. Your best one hire of the next 100 in general, if you want to be an S&P 500 company. And so as I started to do that math, I said, a hire is $1 million transaction, whether it's costing you or making you money. And then I started to look back at what Craig Newmark and others were doing for job ads. And no offense to him, he's laughing his way to the bank, made a ton of money and still doing great. I said, there's got to be a better way for the job description, the job posting, the job ad than static text that looks like it's written like a legal contract. This is a $1 million transaction. We could do better than this. And that's what got me into Ongig.
Love it.
Yeah, super. And along the way, by the way, I know you just mentioned Craig Newmark, but you've also in a prior career, I guess how you got started, you mentioned that you had interviewed Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Andy Grove. I mean, some of the real big hitters.
Yeah, I was real lucky. I started off writing about tech, and so it was my job to chase these guys around. And Bill Gates, when Windows 95, for those of you who can remember that, when that came out, I was over at the Moscone Center. This is in 1995, by the way. Right. That's why I was named. I was at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. I snuck backstage because he's giving the keynote, and I would just say, hey, Bill, so tell me, what are the top 3 things about Windows 95? And it was my job to write an article about them. So I just got I was a little bit of a hustler about things like that. And then really my favorite story, because it shows a lot about the man and how humble truly life can be even for superstars, is that late at night down in San Francisco, I was writing my article, about to file it for Information Week magazine, an article on a new technology company. And I had tried to get the CEO to call me back. And I arranged with his PR person, everything, to set up an interview, and he refused. And it's about 6:30. So lucky that I stayed late that night. Phone rings. I don't know if you remember this. This is back when to record a call, you had to have a special device that you plug in. I
had one of those. Yeah.
Oh, gigantic box.
Go to Radio Shack and get the box. Yep.
So I usually had that thing by my desk and for interviews and things. But anyway, the phone rings and the guy says, "Hey, it's Steve." And I said, "Steve who?" I was at the end of my day. I was probably a little short. And he said, Steve Jobs. And I just said, get the hell out of here. Who is this? One of my buddies from high school, just, jazzing me. And basically, he said, no, I get that all the time, Rob. Is this really Steve Jobs? And I could recognize his voice. And, he gave me an hour of time. Later on, I got to interview him again or talk to him in public on YouTube. There's a bunch of that on there. And basically, though, the thing I learned about that is even who many consider now the greatest inventor, at least of our time, and perhaps he'll go down as one of the greatest inventors ever, even Steve Jobs needs something once in a while, needed something. And that day, his company Next, they weren't doing so great. He was in between his Apple CEO jobs, and Steve needed something, and he had to put in the time. And I remind people that Steve Jobs was not always the mock turtleneck jeans guy with his New Balance sneakers playing that part. He either used to show up in sandals in the early days. Later on, he had to show up in suits to pitch people, and he had to reach out to little old Rob Kelly, a Cub reporter, and get the interview and get some press because he had to sell. Yeah. Right? Which we all have to do.
So let me ask you this, Rob. Ira mentioned earlier when we were talking how I became a groupie. I really feel like I'm becoming a groupie of yours right now. I'm going to follow up and maybe stalk you a little bit. But my curiosity here, I get the opportunity to ask one of my favorite questions. What did you learn? What was it that you were able to take, and as you're witnessing these mind-blowing trailblazers in San Francisco in the 90s, creating a world that didn't exist, what was it that you learned that really helped guide you to the entrepreneur, to the business leader, to the thought leader you are today?
The focus. Great leaders are focused and they simplify. So Gates always impressed me the most. I got to interview him in a more proper setting after chasing him backstage, sit down with him in his office for an hour and some other times. And what really impressed me with Gates was his singular focus on software for all those years. He just unwavering. I mean, only until recently did Microsoft get into Xbox and other hardware and gear. Sure. And that focus on software was just incredible. He could have gone so many different directions. And then with Jobs, I mean, everyone knows this. It was just his attention to detail with creating a beautiful computer. And when he went off to Next, he built what he wanted to at Apple, before and after he got fired. And he just kept talking to me that evening saying, Rob, this is how it's going to be. We're going to have a beautiful computer on our desks. And it's going to be, he didn't say in my hand, by the way. Not only Steve Jobs didn't know that yet. Right. He was working on it. But I learned that those two things, focus and simplification on what you're doing as a leader, is what it's all about. So I try to borrow from those guys.
Awesome.
And gals. I've met some women too.
So Rob, I mean, I got your site pulled up here. I'm just looking over. It's like, okay, where do we start? I mean, let's focus and get to our discussion about job description. As I'm looking here, I guess there's three areas, and this is what I work in. And I'm going to be at the SHRM New York City on Friday, and then SHRM Talent Tuesday and Wednesday, and then. How
do you have time to do this podcast?
I have no idea.
You two are both at either SHRM, HR Transform, or something else. Yeah. Every week it seems like.
Yeah. It's the season has begun. But when I'm out there, I mean, my presentation is, I've got a whole section about how the job description can't be a copy and paste anymore, can't be that legal document, can't look like an IKEA job description, a set of instructions. You got to create a picture, tell a story. So, I'm looking at just one aspect of what Ongig does. And you talk about creating that positive sentiment, being more readable, removing gender bias. So let's talk about each of those. One is the readability. I have a suggestion for during the presentations that I put job descriptions in a word tag, a word tag, a cloud. Word cloud. Yeah, word cloud generator. And I say, this is how it pops up. I mean, this is what you emphasized. And usually it's on adjectives. It's like or compliance, right. Or, it's not on any, the job description isn't even search optimized. So, and it's not very readable. I mean, it's a legal document with a lot of bullets. So, let's talk about how you help companies make it more readable, create a more positive impression.
Yeah, there's something real counterintuitive, and you know your stuff. I've listened to it. I've heard you talk about job titles and SEO. Obviously, it's in your title here. By the way, do you call it internally? Do you call this like something different? Is it like 3G, triple G, G3?
Yeah, G3. Yeah,
G3. There you go.
Yeah, it's GGG. Yeah, it's actually the short version of this is the GGGshow.live.
Nice. Well, if you put on a big event, G3 Summit is not a bad first starting name.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, thanks.
Take that. Yeah, I'm sure you've thought of all the variations of that before.
Yeah, and then I get another idea 2 minutes later.
Yeah, don't we all? So what's fascinating about readability of job descriptions, mostly because they're written either by a HR and not a recruiting or sales type person or copywriter. They're often written by a formal HR person or a busy recruiter or a busy hiring manager. then you get this hodgepodge, as you've pointed out, of content and text that reads more like a legal contract or just poorly written copy. So, readability you asked about, there's a real counterintuitive lesson with readability, which is people want to read at a very low reading level when they read good ads. So this is counterintuitive. For instance, an Apple ad is written at the here's to the crazy ones, that ad where they said here's to the misfits, the rebels, and they showed Einstein and all that. That ad is written at, according to Ongig software, at the 3rd and a half grade level, between 3rd and 4th grade. Interestingly, Mark Twain's at around the 5th grade level, Hemingway's 6th grade level, Harry Potter's 7th grade level, if you like them. Warren Buffett, when he writes to his billionaire friends, or maybe just sent to millionaire friends, is at the 8th and a half grade level. Job descriptions, New York Times is at 9th and a half grade level. Job descriptions are written at a minimum, typically at the 11th grade level, often up to the equivalent of a master's level, multiple graduate degrees.
Sometimes you need a law degree, right?
But let me because I think I know where you're going here. Oh, we're going to do a break soon?
Yeah, so
we're
actually running up. I mean, this is like moving crazy fast.
Well, teaser.
You are listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We're with Rob Kelly today from Ongig. We're talking about the job description, and there's so much to talk about. But we do need to take a quick break. We'll be right back in 2 minutes, and we'll continue the discussion about the readability, gender bias, and a whole lot of other topics related to job descriptions. Stay tuned.
Behind everything you're searching for is something you're actually looking for. When you search with the real Yellow Pages, you get more than a contractor. You get a whole new curb appeal. It's not just getting directions to a dry cleaner with YP.com. It's rescuing an old favorite from the back of the closet. And it's more than finding a locksmith with YP.com on your mobile. It's getting to sleep in your own bed. Whatever it might be, there are more ways to search and more ways to find exactly what you're looking for with the real Yellow Pages, YP.com, and YP.com on your mobile, only from AT&T.
What's up, everyone? This is Keith from the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, powered by JobVite. JobVite knows career paths are made by people, not by open job requisitions. JobVite's platform ties recruitment marketing directly to applicant tracking and onboarding, creating continuous candidate engagement that effectively connects recruiters with qualified passive candidates. Used by over 50,000 recruiters placing over 1 million jobs, JobVite's platform impacts every company in every industry. Check us out at jobvite.com.
Listen carefully. Up to 9 out of 10 job candidates visiting your company career page leave before completing an application. You heard that right. 90% of candidates who want to apply for a job at your company don't. That's just plain crazy, especially in today's tight labor market. Candidate experience matters. Stop turning candidates away. Let Success Performance Solutions help. Call us at 800-803-4303 or register at successperformancesolutions.com/W4CY. Schedule a no-obligation consultation and get special access to insider tips to recruit faster and hire smarter.
Welcome back to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf. I'm here with Keith Compagna, my co-host today, and our very special guest, Rob Kelly from Ongig. We're talking about job descriptions, and it's far from the boring subject that many of you think it might be. Hey, Rob, when we left off, we were talking about the readability of the job description. Some amazing stats you gave. Even Warren Buffett talking to millionaires about billions and billions of dollars where to put his money. Writes on what did you say, like an 8th grade level, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and New York Times is 9th grade level. So one is, we can talk about the readability. One is taking it down a notch, and not only on the words that are used, but make it readable. I mean, that somebody wants to pick it up and read it. Nobody wants to read through 15 bullet points of essential responsibilities. But you have this on the website. It's that a single word in your job description could equal a negative candidate experience. A single negative word. What are some examples that you've come across that people do? And this probably plays into the next area I want to go, is gender bias, which is huge. Especially with every day now you're talking. There's more talk about the Me Too movement and how things we got away with just 4 or 5 years ago are now going to turn someone off. So let's start with the positive sentiment. What are some of the negative words that you often see in job descriptions that turn off people?
Well, we're starting to put the negative words into what we call exclusionary words as a bucket in general. And gender is the big one people talk about, but I'm going to give you some examples of non-gender ones too. If you go on Indeed or any job board, go look at the following phrase that is in many tech jobs, and that is that the candidate is required to have experience with the master-slave data architecture, database architecture. Master-slave. Two words, and you're going to turn off a whole bunch of candidates.
Sure.
Right? A big cable company tried to be clever, which is a bad move in job descriptions in general, especially with titles, by the way, but tried to be clever. They're hiring cable, the guys and gals who go out and install your cable TV.
Right.
Out.
Yep.
And they said, hey, we're really into customer service. We're looking for the driving Miss Daisy type attitude. Those of you who remember the movie Driving Miss Daisy?
Yeah. So going for a millennial, or going for anybody that's under 40 probably, who's never seen Miss Daisy, they don't even know what it's about.
Right.
And for those that do, you offended them, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
And then, interestingly, too, we go deeper on things like, with age bias, if you use a phrase like digital native, you should be a digital native. Well, you're turning off some potential. You better make sure you really want a digital native, or someone who's born in this sort of generation of technology, because otherwise you're going to turn off some more experienced pros who say, well, I was born before then, but they could be a master at WhatsApp marketing. So You're better off saying what you need in that case. That you need an expert at WhatsApp marketing. You need someone with a couple years of experience at WhatsApp marketing or Facebook marketing or PPC on Google, and not a digital native. And in fact, that could get you sued for discrimination from the Age Bias Act. So you got to be careful. One word can turn off a candidate, and one word can get you into a lawsuit.
So have you seen an uptick on I guess, business or clients approaching you, especially with gender bias? Is there even an awareness of that job descriptions many job descriptions have that bias?
Oh, absolutely. We get it. That's our main inquiries these days, are folks are interested in Ongig's job description software to solve the problem of gender bias. And it starts there, and then they're interested in other bias too. Some examples I just gave, but gender bias is huge. Hiring more women, just having the job postings be gender neutral as a goal, sometimes coming right down from the CEO. I think it's up to 500 plus CEOs who have signed that pact that they're going to make sure that they're have a diverse workforce. The CEO Action Diversity, I think it's called.
Right. I got a question for you, Rob. We're talking about the nitty gritty of making change inside of HR, and to your on point examples, the reality is that HR is inherently going to react based off of risk management or risk aversion. The challenge is that we all know, we're very familiar with the idea that HR is challenged with finding vendors, going through a business case, building the value so that they can get the money from the CEO and the CFO so that they can actually implement, and then they need to train their staff to use the software effectively. For our listening audience out there that's trying to get out of their own way, what have you seen work inside of the organizations that you've worked with that help them build that business case? Or were you fortunate enough that everybody contacted you because the CEO told them to?
I wish that was the case. You know how that goes. That'd be nice. Bluebirds, as they call them, coming to your window. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, a couple things. One is that, using that example of, hey, an HR leader can go to their head of HR if they're not the head already, or go to their leadership, CEO, CFO, CEO, and say, hey, how come we're not one of those top 500 companies whose CEOs are agreeing to make diversity a priority? Why can't we join in, on that? And they can make it an initiative themselves. I tend to take a bottom line approach to this, and you're in sales, Keith, so I'll give you this example. I don't know if this is how JobVite is, or most companies that I know, when you look at their sales teams, most companies I talk to are typically around 70-30 men, maybe 60-40, something around there. And there are exceptions, certainly. But in general, I'd say if I talk to 20 companies, 19 of them are in that range. So it's been proven, no offense, Keith, it's been proven women are just as good as men at sales.
None taken.
And in fact, a little bit better in a couple of studies, just statistically slightly better, a little more empathy and things like that.
Sure.
So, I talk to heads of sales sometimes even, and heads of HRs, and they're working together. And I say, well, hey, look at your job descriptions. I can tell you they're gender biased. I'm looking right here, just like most of them. Our software says it's gender biased. Do you realize, Mrs. Head of Sales or Mr. Head of Sales, usually Mr. Head of Sales, unfortunately, do you realize that you could get an uptick in the caliber of sales pros that you hire if you just gender neutralize all your sales job postings? Who are you losing out because they didn't give you an at-bat because you turned off a woman who was better than the guy you hired because you only had 2 people come in for the interview? They're both guys. Right. So that hits bottom line.
So on the flip side of that, technology is notoriously male-dominated, as is a lot of healthcare, especially in nursing. Do you see the reverse situation happening, that it's so female-specific that people are now looking for ways to attract males into, or vice versa. Obviously, technology is male-dominated, so, you've been talking about that. But like in nursing,
sure,
90, I think the last statistic I knew is like 92% of RNs are female.
Female, absolutely.
Yeah, you nailed it. We're just starting to see healthcare companies coming to us, and as you know, both of you know, hiring a nurse is one of the hardest positions for many healthcare companies, just getting a registered nurse, depending on where you are in the country, but super hard problem to solve. And you're right, vast majority are women, and there's some great, one of our favorite nurses was a man who helped deliver our little boy Maverick, and that's a huge problem to solve. So yes, we're starting to see that.
So we're, again, every week we end up talking a lot about recruitment marketing. If you've read or heard any of my stuff out there, Rob, I'm talking about the basics. I mean, this is new to HR and recruiters, but it's for digital marketers. It's old stuff. So, again, I'm looking at your website here. You talk about the most effective job description content. And currently, I don't know what the percentage is, maybe of how many job descriptions are just strictly text. It's got to be probably 90%, maybe greater.
More. It's got to be more than that.
Yeah. So, but you look as what do you add? Now, some of this stuff I wouldn't have even thought of. Video, I've been suggesting for a while. Add a video to your job description.
Sure.
Add images, at minimum. If you don't want to do a video, add an image. And, and a stat that you quoted is content that includes a picture produces 650% more engagement, the text-only content. I've seen that as high as 1,200%, higher. But then you talk about, this was interesting. I mean, talking about the ratings, right in the job description, talking about your Glassdoor ratings, what other jobs do you have available? Maybe this one doesn't suit you. But you talked about comments, adding comments and chat right into the job description. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, how does that work?
Well, let me tell you. So there, and I've listened to a bunch of your shows on where you talk about video and visual job postings and the importance of that with candidate experience and others. So I know we're on that same bus together. We lucked out. What we found out early on was we started to test things. What happens if you add a video to a text-only job description? So we did it. And what we found was a couple things. One was that the candidate spent more time on the page. It went up from, and you've reported on this on one of your shows, I forget which one, but how, the average time on a job description is around 30, 40 seconds, something like that. By the way, on mobile, we found it's as low as just 2 or 3 seconds. With an 8 player.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 8 player is gone after 2 or 3. So we added video and some pictures, and we started to look. We saw an uptick on time on page, as you both know, key statistic in Google Analytics. And then we said, okay, well, let's look at adding some other things. We did that only because we said the modern day job page, whether you're going after millennials or great passive, more experienced candidates, what page on the web are they looking at that doesn't have a hero piece of media, that doesn't look like it's a magazine article, right? I mean, unless they're looking at law journals or medical journals, that's the modern day job page. So we started there and we saw the uptick in time on page. We said, what else could we do? So to your point, we started to look at what if we added their Glassdoor ratings and reviews onto the job posting? What would happen? And what we found was it was amazing. If you add, it depends on your rating. First off,
I'm sure.
Candidates love it, by the way, no matter what the rating is. Candidates love it. They say, oh, transparent company. Like they're just putting this up there. This is great. But we found, I'm just looking at the stats here, apply rates go up 52% to 59% if you've got a Glass rating of 3 or higher. And you put up your Glassdoor info, you can see apply rates go up 50+% higher.
Wow.
And that's just at a rating of 3 or higher on Glassdoor, which most employers should at least have that.
Yep, right. Yeah, they got bigger problems.
If not, they should be working towards it.
They should be working on it. Yes, exactly. So we started to add what we call on recruiting widgets onto the job posting. And the video and pictures are kind of the biggest widget, but they're the hero media. That's kind of table stakes. But then we started to add like a Glassdoor widget. What would happen if you added a map? Because candidates want to know what the commute is or how quick they can get to the job. And an address is almost never in a job posting. You don't actually know where it is. Well, San Francisco, well, where?
Right.
Or
right.
is it
It could be hours difference. Yeah.
Yeah. People will move and go to jobs for various reasons, as you both know. So we started to do these recruiting widgets, chat you mentioned, and some others. We even do how walkable or bikeable a job is. Candidates love that. Cool. They want to know, can I bike to work, or is it transit friendly near restaurants? And we saw huge uptakes on the time on page, and Entrepreneur Magazine wrote a nice piece on us on Ongig about this, where basically we had the highest time on page and with up to 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes a candidate.
Wow.
It was like a mini recruiter meeting the candidate was having, and all they were doing was interacting with the job posting.
How about it? Hey, Rob, keeping an eye on the clock here. I want to change lanes a little bit. I'm going to liberate one of Ira's favorite questions, and that is to say, let's get you back on the show a year from today, right? What is it that you think we're talking about a year from now? Or what would you like to be talking about maybe in a year from now?
There'll be a lot of talk still about AI. Like AI is going to be the big talk for the foreseeable future, and because it relates to HR, as you two have covered, a bunch, whether it's going to replace people or not. And my view, by the way, is that new technology represents us. So it's what we do with it. If we're jerks in the world, we're going to do jerky things. If we're awesome people, we're going to do awesome things, and it'll create tons of jobs. So I believe I'm an optimist in life, and I believe it'll all work out. We'll use AI to do awesome things. It'll replace some people, but it'll create massive amounts of jobs. But back to the job description, it's still going to be here. It's going to continue to transform, and it's still going to be, as your guest, who was it that was on recently talking about? She was great.
Karen Young.
Yeah,
about job
Karen was
description?
awesome.
Yeah, Karen. Yeah,
she said the job description is the hub, and it has spokes reaching out to all the other things, recruiting and talent management and onboarding and everything else. That's still going to be right there and always will be, because you need a piece of job content to sell the job.
How about it?
So we're about, it's unbelievable. I think this hit the record for fast-moving show. We're about 5 minutes from getting kicked off the air here. Rob, I guess one of the questions I have is a lot of both Keith and I, we run across a lot of small businesses. I mean, how do people purchase Ongig? I mean, can they? Is it a contract? Can they purchase the access for one job description? What's the process, and how do they do that? How do they get in contact with you?
Yep, as Keith, I'm sure, can appreciate, it's enterprise software. It's as a subscription, much like JobVite, and you typically subscribe to it as an enterprise. As a company, right? Yep. Yeah, we're not doing anything for individuals right now. Sorry to tiny.
Yeah, how small a company are you fit for? I mean, how affordable is a subscription?
We focus on people hiring at least 100 people per year.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
Yep. Cool. And so they subscribe, and it's typical enterprise software type investment. Although we make it real easy, it's very flat rate, so you can control it within your budget. We show you how it makes the ROI work.
Excellent.
Yeah, and again, I've been following you guys for a long time, so I'm really honored that you accepted the invitation to be part of the show.
Oh, come on. It's my honor.
You guys, I mean, your blogs are outstanding, and just looking at this, I mean, there are if the company's only got 25 employees and they only hire once a year, there are ways. I mean, take some of your examples, add a video, add a picture, add a map. I mean, there are so many different ways that they can learn from you, even if they don't use your software. You guys are crazy in transparency. I mean, it sounds like you give away all your trade secrets, right here. But you're doing some good stuff. What's the best ways to get in contact with you, get in contact with Ongig?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One is, you just brought it up. Go check out our content. It's all free. We don't even do, I can't say we won't do it one day, but we don't ask for like your emails and other things to get into a PDF or something. We just write what we think is going to help. And we do it selfishly too, of course. We write good content in the hopes that the right prospects and partners will see it and say, that's me. I resonate with that. And the heroes of the world, the HR and the talent leaders, will say, wow, Ongig's thinking about this. Maybe I should talk to them. And if you like the content and like our values and principles, then, we got that good old demo request button in the upper right. Click it, and trust me, it'll go to, I see every one of them, and it'll go to our team, and one of us will spend some time with you and see if we can solve your problems, help you with them.
Yeah, and how accessible are you if somebody wants to reach out to you?
Rob@ongig.com or on LinkedIn. I promise if they reference this show especially, it'll get immediate attention, and I'll read it eventually, no matter what.
This guy is awesome.
Hey, I appreciate it. Any closing words of wisdom, Rob?
You never asked it. We never finished on the Guinness Book of World Records.
Oh, that's right.
How did you get in?
How did I get in? You didn't.
You just showed up.
Yeah, pretty much showed up. We were on actually 3 weeks ago, St. Patrick's Day. Basically, they had the largest human shamrock in Elmira, New York. And my nephew was in charge of it. He's a meteorologist up there. And we got to stand in the middle of a baseball field and become part of the world's largest human shamrock.
That was you.
That was you.
Well, real quickly, I know we got to close up. For me, I believe it was back in 1995. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, on that little riverbank over there. And basically, folks were handing out guitars. And I said, what's going on? And they said, we're going to try to enter the Guinness Book of World Records, largest number of people ever playing for the longest period of time. And so fast forward, we had 1,500 people playing for 55 minutes, one song, Twist and Shout by the Beatles.
Nice.
And we won it. We got in. And I will never play that song again.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, so anyway, hey, Rob, this has been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate you being here. Again, our guest today on the Geek Skeezers and Googlization show. I almost got through without stumbling over it. Rob, hey, thank you. Yeah, really, really appreciate it. For those who going to be in New York, SHRM. I'll be there Friday, SHRM Talent. I'll be there Tuesday and Wednesday. Northeast Pennsylvania SHRM. I'll be there Thursday. Keith, you're here, right?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm going to be getting
you're
back
in the Lehigh Valley.
I'm going to be getting out of my comfort zone even that much more, getting back to the LinkedIn video blogs, and I'm going to start writing my own stuff. So look for that on the profile.
Good.
Keith and Ira, you do an awesome job. Congrats on this show.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much, Robbie. A pleasure. You've been listening to the Geek Skeezers and Googlization show, where we bring you topics and thought leaders discussing a future of work where the tired, the wired, and technology converge. Until next Wednesday and every Wednesday after that, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY.com or iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, you name it. We're on, I think, 20 different podcasts. Replay will be up hopefully by Friday, definitely by the weekend. This is your host, Ira Wolf, my co-host, Keith Campagna. Don't let the shift hit your plans.